Plato versus Aristotle. When people talk about the first great philosophical fight, they usually mean Plato and his student Aristotle. Their clash shaped Western thought for over 2,000 years. Plato, born in Athens in 427 BCE, believed that reality is divided. The physical world we see is imperfect, always changing, but behind it exists eternal, unchanging forms, like perfect templates for beauty, justice, or circle. Knowledge, for Plato, meant turning away from appearances and grasping those pure ideals with reason. Aristotle, who studied at Plato's academy for 20 years, couldn't disagree more. He insisted truth is found here, in the concrete world, through observing plants, animals, politics, logic, even seashells. He cataloged over 500 species and founded entire sciences in pursuit of this. For him, forms don't float in another realm. They're embedded in things themselves. This wasn't just a technical debate, it was a worldview split. Plato leaned mystical, otherworldly, idealistic. Aristotle was empirical, practical, grounded. One said, trust reason beyond the senses. The other, start with the senses, then build reason. The outcome? Centuries of philosophy toggling between Platonists, who emphasize abstract ideals, and Aristotelians, who demand empirical evidence. Even today, the tension lives on, in arguments between pure mathematics versus applied science, or moral idealism versus political realism. In short, Plato looked upward, Aristotle outward, and together they framed the battlefield of Western thought. Heraclitus versus Parmenides. Before Plato and Aristotle, there was an even older philosophical cage match. Heraclitus versus Parmenides, two men asking a terrifyingly simple question. Is reality stable, or is it always slipping away? Heraclitus, active around 500 BCE in Ephesus, declared, everything flows. The world is constant change, like fire, always flickering, never the same twice. His famous line, you can't step into the same river twice because both you and the river have changed. For him, struggle and transformation weren't problems. They were the very law of existence. Parmenides from Elia said, not so fast. Around the same era, he argued the opposite. Reality does not change. Movement, birth, death, division, all illusions. True being is one, eternal, unshifting. Our senses may deceive us, but pure reason reveals stability. This was an armchair quibbling. Their disagreement split Greek philosophy right down the middle. If Heraclitus was right, knowledge had to embrace chaos, patterns, and flux. If Parmenides was right, knowledge meant piercing through false appearances to an eternal truth. The impact? The next 2,500 years of Western thought are basically people wrestling with this paradox. Do we build science on observing constant flow, or metaphysics on seeking timeless order? Physicists today echo Heraclitus, studying particles in motion. Logicians echo Parmenides, searching for perfect constants. Two men, opposite answers, but together they frame the deepest tension in human thought. Is reality a river, or is it a rock? The Stoics versus the Epicureans. When ancient Greeks argued, what's the best way to live? Two rival schools dominated. The Stoics and the Epicureans. Two names still thrown around today, often misunderstood. The Stoics, founded by Zeno of Citium around 300 BCE, believed virtue, living in harmony with reason and nature, was the only true good. External things, wealth, pain, even death, were indifferent. What mattered was controlling your own mind. With self-mastery, you could face anything calmly, even disaster. This resilience made Stoicism beloved by Roman statesmen, warriors, even Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The Epicureans, led by Epicurus, took a different angle. The goal of life wasn't power or fame, it was pleasure, but not wild indulgence. For them, true pleasure meant freedom from pain, fear, and anxiety. That meant friendship, moderation, and peace of mind. Epicurus warned excess would trap you. Happiness lived in a quiet garden, not a palace. So one school trained you to embrace hardship with steel-like endurance. The other urged you to simplify life and savor simple joys. Their clash wasn't just theory. It shaped real cultures. Stoicism guiding leaders through crisis, Epicureanism guiding ordinary people to inner calm. Which side won? In truth, both still rule today. We call tough resilience Stoic and joyful balance Epicurean. Two ancient visions competing, one of discipline, one of delight. Hobbes versus Locke. If Plato and Aristotle framed reality, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke framed government. And their clash still defines politics today. Hobbes, writing in the chaos of England's civil war in the mid-1600s, saw human beings as naturally selfish and violent. In his classic Leviathan, 1651, he warned that without authority, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. His solution? A powerful, even absolute ruler. A social contract where individuals surrender freedom to a sovereign in exchange for order. Stability, even under a strong hand, was survival. Locke, just a generation later, witnessed the glorious revolution of 1688, which removed a king without total collapse. He drew the opposite conclusion. In two treatises of government, 1689, Locke argued that humans are capable of reason, cooperation, and self-rule. People are born with natural rights, life, liberty, property, and governments must protect, not trample, those rights. If rulers fail, citizens can justly overthrow them. This wasn't a polite disagreement. It was a fork in political destiny. Hobbes laid the intellectual foundation for centralized authority, even modern authoritarianism. Locke became the godfather of liberal democracy, inspiring the U.S. Declaration of Independence and modern constitutions worldwide. So, are humans beasts needing chains, or free beings deserving rights? Hobbes and Locke never settled it. But every argument about freedom versus security is their fight playing out again. Kant versus Hume. David Hume, the Scottish skeptic of the 1700s, shook philosophy to its core. In his treatise of human nature, 1739, he argued that all knowledge comes through experience, but experience only shows us sequences, not certainty. For example, you never see causation, you just see one billiard ball strike another and assume cause and effect. For Hume, reason isn't a sovereign guide. It's a slave of the passions, and the structures we trust, causality, morality, are habits of mind, not solid truths. To Immanuel Kant, this was an earthquake. He admitted, Hume woke me from my dogmatic slumber. But instead of abandoning reason, Kant tried to rescue it. In Critique of Pure Reason, 1781, he argued the human mind isn't a blank slate. It actively shapes experience. Categories like space, time, and causality aren't just learned. They're baked into how we perceive the world. Without them, experience would be chaos. This duel became legendary. Hume tore down philosophy's confidence in certainty. Kant rebuilt it by showing how our mind structures reality itself. The impact? Enormous. Hume seeded modern skepticism and science's reliance on probability. Kant launched German idealism, moral philosophy, and the framework that influenced Einstein's theories of space and time. So the fight boiled down to this. Hume said the mind is a passive observer. Kant countered, no, the mind is the architect. And every debate between radical empiricism and rational order still echoes their battle. Rousseau versus Voltaire. The Enlightenment loved reason, progress, and debate, but no two figures clash more bitterly than Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Voltaire. Their feud was as much personal as philosophical. Rousseau, born in Geneva in 1712, believed humans are naturally good but corrupted by civilization's chains. In his Discourse on Inequality, 1755, he claimed private property, this is mine, was the root of injustice. In the Social Contract, 1762, he argued legitimate politics must rest on the general will, collective freedom over selfish interest. His vision was passionate, egalitarian, almost revolutionary. Voltaire, the Parisian wit nearly 20 years older, couldn't resist attacking him. A champion of reason, satire, and elite culture, Voltaire saw Rousseau's back to nature, idealism as dangerous naivety. When Rousseau wrote against the arts and sciences corrupting morals, Voltaire mocked him. I have received your new book against the human race. Never was so much intelligence used to make us all into beasts. Ouch! Their fight became legendary. Rousseau, the emotional prophet of democracy. Voltaire, the razor-tongued defender of civilization, tolerance, and irony. Rousseau inspired the French Revolution. Voltaire became a symbol of free speech and Enlightenment skepticism. The long-term impact? They set up a split still alive today. The romantic faith in human purity versus the cynical trust in mocking illusions. Every time politics swings between fiery revolution and satirical critique, it's Rousseau and Voltaire still arguing. Marx versus Smith. Few philosophical matchups shaped the modern world more than Adam Smith versus Karl Marx. Two thinkers separated by a century, but locked in eternal debate. Adam Smith, writing in 1776, the very year of the American Revolution, published The Wealth of Nations, often called the Bible of capitalism. He argued that when individuals freely pursue their own gain, markets channel those efforts into prosperity for all, guided by the invisible hand. Smith believed trade, competition, and limited government interference would generate wealth and innovation. His ideas fueled the Industrial Revolution, global trade, and modern economics. But a century later, Karl Marx unleashed the counterattack. In the Communist Manifesto, 1848, and Das Kapital, 1867, Marx argued capitalism doesn't lift all boats, it drowns the many to enrich the few. For him, Smith's invisible hand concealed exploitation. Workers alienated from their labor, crushed into poverty, while capitalists hoarded profits. His solution? Revolution. The workers of the world uniting to seize the means of production and build a classless society. Who won? Neither disappeared. Smith's capitalism dominates the global economy, from Wall Street to world trade. But Marx's critique fueled revolutions, shaped labor rights, welfare states, and still drives debates about inequality. Their fight endures in every headline about billionaires, wages, and economic justice. Smith gave us the engine. Marx demanded we question the cost. And we're all still living in their argument. Nietzsche versus Kierkegaard. When it comes to existential crises, few voices thunder louder than Friedrich Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard. Men who asked how to live when old certainties collapse. Kierkegaard, a Danish writer in the 1840s, confronted the rise of doubt in Christianity. He believed modern life left people hollow, despair, he called it. His answer? The leap of faith. Rational arguments can't prove God, but through radical commitment to faith, an individual can find authentic meaning. In works like Fear and Trembling, 1843, he praised Abraham's trust in God as the model of true courage. A generation later, Nietzsche, writing in the 1880s, declared God is dead. He didn't mean literally, but that faith no longer anchored European culture. Without it, people risked collapsing into nihilism. His solution wasn't faith, but the Übermensch, a higher type of human who creates values in a godless universe, living through the will to power. For Nietzsche, clinging to divine reassurance was weakness. So, Kierkegaard saw faith as the only way out of despair. Nietzsche saw faith as a trap, and human self-creation as the only salvation. Both wrestled with the terror of meaninglessness, but offered opposite exits, one toward God, the other beyond God. The impact? Kierkegaard fathered existential faith. Nietzsche fathered existential rebellion. And their divide carved the very heart of modern philosophy. Surrender to the divine, or embrace the abyss. Freud versus Jung. One of the most famous intellectual feuds began as a friendship. Sigmund Freud, founder of psychoanalysis, saw the human mind as a battlefield of repressed desires, with sexuality at the core. By the early 1900s, he considered Carl Jung his crown prince and the future of the movement. For years, the two traded hundreds of letters, even traveling together to America in 1909 to spread psychoanalysis. But cracks appeared quickly. Freud insisted sexual drives, especially repressed infantile ones, were the central engine of neurosis. Jung disagreed. He thought the psyche was deeper and more expansive. Myths, symbols, and what he coined the collective unconscious, a reservoir of archetypes like the hero, the mother, the shadow, that shaped human imagination across cultures. Freud considered this mysticism, a betrayal of science. Jung considered Freud's obsession with sexuality a narrowing of the mind. By 1913, the friendship collapsed. Freud fainted during one heated confrontation. After, they never reconciled. The fallout? Freud's psychoanalysis became the foundation for modern psychiatry and therapy. Jung's analytical psychology inspired art, literature, religion studies, and even today's pop culture talk of archetypes. Their fight symbolized more than theory. It was a clash of two visions of humanity. Freud narrowing in on hidden drives, Jung opening out to deep symbolism. Psychoanalysis split down the middle, and psychology forever carried the scar of their feud. Camus versus Sartre. In mid-20th century Paris, Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre were the rock stars of existentialism. They smoked in the same cafes, wrote in the same journals, even admired each other's brilliance. But by the 1950s, their friendship exploded into one of philosophy's most famous rivalries. Camus, a French Algerian, survived poverty and the Nazi occupation. In works like The Myth of Sisyphus, 1942, and The Plague, 1947, he argued life is absurd, without clear meaning or divine purpose. But his answer wasn't despair. It was rebellion, to live authentically, to resist injustice, but without utopias. Camus distrusted any ideology claiming to fix humanity. Sartre, meanwhile, in Being and Nothingness, 1943, pushed existential freedom to the maximum. Humans are condemned to be free, shaping themselves through choices. After the war, Sartre turned political, supporting Marxism, even justifying violence in the struggle against colonialism. For him, freedom demanded engagement, even revolution. Camus rejected this. In 1951's The Rebel, he condemned revolutionary violence as replacing one tyranny with another. Sartre in his journal publicly attacked him, calling the book timid and naive. Their friendship shattered forever. The impact? Huge. Sartre became the face of radical engagement, influencing student revolts and leftist movements. Camus stood for moral limits, inspiring human rights advocates who refuse ends justify means politics. Their fight asks a timeless question. In a broken world, is meaning found in personal dignity or total political commitment? No easy answer, but their split still frames how we choose between rebellion and revolution. Foucault versus Derrida. By the 1960s and 70s, Parisian philosophy was on fire, and two names towered above the rest: Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida. Both were radicals, both challenged traditional philosophy, but they clashed brutally over where truth hides. Foucault, author of Discipline and Punish, 1975, and The History of Sexuality, argued that knowledge is never neutral. It's wrapped in power. From prisons to hospitals to schools, institutions shape how we define normal and true. For him, philosophy had to uncover these hidden power structures. Derrida, in contrast, launched deconstruction, the idea that language itself is unstable, words always slipping in meaning. In Of Grammatology, 1967, he showed how texts undermine themselves, that presence and certainty are illusions. If Foucault saw prisons outside us, Derrida saw prisons inside language. Their feud erupted in public. Derrida critiqued Foucault's history of madness, accusing him of smuggling metaphysics back into an anti-metaphysical project. Foucault fired back, dismissing Derrida as obsessed with textual minutiae instead of real history and politics. The tension never healed. Legacy? Foucault became the prophet of power, inspiring activism, gender studies, surveillance critiques. Derrida became the guru of meaning's fragility, fueling literary theory, cultural studies, and postmodern skepticism. So the fight was this: does domination lie in systems or in words themselves? Even today, debates in universities echo their duel: Foucault's politics or Derrida's texts. Two French giants, one fractured postmodern stage. Chomsky versus Foucault. In 1971, Dutch TV staged what became one of the most famous philosophy debates ever: Noam Chomsky versus Michel Foucault. It was a showdown between two brilliant but utterly different visions of human nature. Chomsky, the American linguist who revolutionized language theory, believed humans are born with an innate, universal grammar. For him, there are deep structures wired into the brain that make language possible, and by extension, a natural core of justice and creativity lying in all of us. In politics, this aligned Chomsky with a rationalist faith: uncover our universal moral instincts, and we can build fairer societies. Foucault fired back from the opposite pole. He rejected the idea of timeless human nature. In his view, what we call truth, or justice, is produced by historical power relations. Schools, prisons, governments, but also language itself, shape what we believe is natural. To Foucault, Chomsky's innate justice was just another cultural construct. The televised clash grew tense. Chomsky calmly insisted that without universals, critique collapses. Foucault countered that appeals to human nature disguise domination. No handshake agreement followed. The impact? Gigantic. Chomsky's camp fed into modern linguistics, cognitive science, and rationalist political critique. Foucault's camp energized postmodernism, critical theory, and endless debates on identity and power. Their fight distilled a timeless split. Are we guided by universal human truths, or are we constructed entirely by history and power? A single TV hour left philosophy still divided.